Hey guys, welcome to Now That's Debatable. This is your host, Fantastic Facade. I am joined with my trusty co-host, Triple A the Humanist. Today, we were supposed to have a special guest on, but he had to push it back until next week. But next week, if things align, we should be having Fanatic, a former Christian rapper, coming on the show to discuss morality and Christianity and just kind of our journeys and have a good conversation. We'll be obviously open to chat and questions if you have any. Today, since our last response video got such an overwhelming response, we're
Right.
going to do another response video that I happened to come across while looking for a potential response video to do last week as a second response video, just because that one got so much traction. So if you guys are enjoying these and you're liking these, let us know, and we'll continue to do them. And honestly, we might continue to do them anyway if they continue to get the views that they're getting. Just because, not to be a terrible media-centric person, but views are nice. They will
Yeah.
help the channel grow, and they'll help our normal conversational style discussions and debates go bigger and better, and maybe potentially even to people like Cliff Nettle, which is this is another one of his videos from Give Me an Answer. This is not Cliff. This is a guy by the name of Stuart. He's out on a college campus chatting with people, asking them about their religious beliefs, and here's a TikTok video of it. But I've been talking a while. Triple A, how you doing, buddy?
I'm chilling, man. Like, as we play this video, I like to hear what y'all think. When you see it, when I first saw it, I got the impression that it was quasi scripted, almost as if she was coached. Maybe, she came up with this herself, but this doesn't seem like this was an off the cuff response to this question. It seemed like she was very prepared and had a very well rehearsed response. I was going to say a well thought out, but I don't want to use those words.
Yeah,
A
I
well
wouldn't call it
reasoned,
well
nah,
thought out. I would
well
say
rehearsed as well.
rehearsed.
I'll call it.
Yeah, well rehearsed, well performed, well put together, maybe, but not well thought
Yeah,
out. And I would agree. We'll watch the video, just kind of a format for this episode. Is we're gonna watch this video. It's 1 minute and 8 seconds long from beginning to end, and then we're going to stop it, go back and watch it, and kind of give our thoughts and opinions on it, and just break it down a little bit. This is again a self-proclaimed Christian on a college campus, and if you guys want, we can. Since we're gonna play the whole video, it's not really much of a need, but if you'd like, we can share it um, in the comments of our video. But I will say that I don't know if it's necessarily coaching or if it's kind of like how you and I do, and it's practice where you've come up with a canned response. So, somebody said, "All things theology. Are there good reasons to be a Christian?"
hit up.
I'm gonna say there's quasi good reasons to be a Christian. There's not convincing to other people though, and by that I mean you can have certain feelings and or emotions that come out due to the nature of religion, church, and how like churches and worship groups and stuff are set up. However, I will say that they are fundamentally and undoubtedly specific to the individual. So it's not a good reason to necessarily believe in Christianity. However, I will say people can be convinced by it because it can be a very emotional, very telling thing. They can get a lot out of it in the sense of community and or emotional support and or relief by having the sensation of prayers being heard, if not necessarily answered, being heard by this divine creature in the sky. But again, those are kind of quasi good reasons to believe in Christianity. This one kind of goes a different route, and I'm sadly just gonna spoil the ending. We're gonna destroy it. So, without further ado, we're gonna go ahead and kick this one off, and feel free to ask questions or give your thoughts in chat, and we'll try to get them up on the screen.
Are you a Christian?
I am, yes.
How come you're a Christian?
I'm a Christian because I can't base my value system on something that is societal norms, because societal norms changes. And so, for example, if I have a hand difference, and if I was born in the 50s, I would have been automatically aborted, not allowed to full term. And so back even in the 90s when I was born, even that was a concern. And so I can't base my value of life and my value system or another person's value of life based off something that's a societal norm that could change in a decade or even change within 5 years. And so for me, Christianity offers that value system that's constant and consistent with the value of life, the value of diversity, and the value of free will and choice. And so for me personally, that's why I've chosen to be a Christian, in addition to all the other great things that God offers with having a relationship with Him.
So I actually, fun fact, that's the end of the video. I know it goes on for another, 10-ish seconds or so, 18 seconds, but that's the end of the video. It's just this screen from there forward. And I just thought I'd remind or let everyone know, I actually emailed Stuart on behalf of Now That's Debatable to ask about having Cliff come on the show. I don't know if it's going to go anywhere. We're tiny. We're small. We're not... I know he's debated people like Matt Dillahunty before. He's debated other pastors before. But just wanted to throw it out there. I did send an invite via Stuart to Cliff. So if he'd like to come on the show, which we did a response video. The last response video we did was to Cliff directly about 6 miracles atheists believe in. So
my first thoughts, I guess, is watching the whole video in the full. Just putting on my old reformer hat, like 2017, 2018, Tribulette would have been face palming himself because I didn't hear one mention of Jesus.
Yeah, that was one of the first criticisms I had. Now, I
would have told her she ain't saved.
Yeah, I might have said that this is like semi-borderline heretical.
Yeah,
because to me, back when I was a professing Christian, the standard issue of why are you a Christian is because Jesus. Like, you don't necessarily need to get too much further than that. But Jesus should be like the first words out of your mouth. Like, the grace of God, I am saved through his son Jesus. That would have been like the first sentence out of my mouth as a 2010, 2000, probably before, but somewhere around that 2006 to 2012 era, those would have been my words.
Yes, she briefly spoke on morality and she went into abortion a little bit. She gets some things wrong and some things I don't understand, but just putting on my Christian hat, I'm like, I would have said, you know what? Yeah, world views are nice, but that's not what Christianity is for. It's not to give you a moral system, or it's not to give you a consistent worldview. It's to save you from judgment. But that's the old reform me. I'm not sure what type of Christianity she's coming from.
Yeah, given that she mentioned specifically free will, I'd say it's undoubtedly a form of Protestantism, probably closer to like Baptist, not probably Arminian, not Calvinist, given that they mentioned free will. And that's also something that I grew up in. So I grew up in a free will home, although I would say later in my Christian life, I abandoned free will for Calvinism, and before I abandoned Christianity altogether. But now I think we can go through and kind of break it down. But yeah, I 100% agree. By the way, like, if that's not your answer, if your answer of why you're a Christian has nothing to do with Jesus, and you want to stay a Christian, I'd recommend talking to some people like your fellow Christians, pastors, people of elders of the church, if you will, about your salvation. Not necessarily to like, get it, but to just have a firmer understanding of what Christianity claims to be all about. So without further ado, we're gonna play the video again.
What up, Phantom?
Phantom's in. Hey, what's up, Phantom?
Yeah.
I didn't see his chat, but I trust. Oh, there it goes. Delayed. Nonetheless, we're gonna watch it back through. Let me know if you'd like to pause, and I may pause it without your before you get to it. But you're probably gonna stop me more often than I would.
Are you a Christian?
I am, yes.
How come you're a Christian?
I'm a Christian because I can't base my value system on something that is societal norms, because societal norms.
Right there.
Yeah, I'm with you. I was gonna try to finish that sentence, but she goes pretty quick into the next one, so I think that's a good pause.
Yes. She's a Christian because she can't place her values on societal norms. So first, to be clear, so she's not contrasting Christianity with atheism. She's contrasting Christianity with non-Christians.
Yeah.
And so that includes everybody that isn't Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, etc. Now, the vast majority of those non-Christians aren't even atheists, and they wouldn't place their value system on societal norms. As a matter of fact, we're two atheists and we don't place our morality on societal norms. Yep. So this is a strange way to approach morality, or to approach reasons to be a Christian in the beginning. So she can't place it on societal norms. Okay, so you don't have to do that. That has nothing to do with that. And also, you could also be a Christian and still place your morality based upon societal norms. I know Christians that do that.
Yeah, I mean, we even have examples of things like Paul. Paul was saying, render to Caesar that which is Caesar, obey the law.
Right.
Like these are societal norms, if you will, by proxy of law set up by humans that Christians are told to follow.
Right.
So I know people that take that very literally. So
right, when Paul said, "When in Rome, do as the Romans do." I'm joking. That's not in the Bible.
I'm pretty sure that was right after he said "Vini Vidi Vici" because he was in Rome and they spoke Italian.
Norms changes, and so for example, if I have a hand difference, and if I was born in the 50s, I would have been automatically aborted, not allowed to full term.
Right there.
Yeah.
That was weird. Like, is she in America?
Yes.
Because I was listening to the accent. It sounds American.
I didn't want to. I'm not gonna oust exactly where they're from. However, I will say that they are east of the Mississippi in the United States at a college campus. And,
okay.
If it helps,
you said
they're in the southern half. So if you cut the United States down the Mississippi River, and then again, right in the middle, they're in the southern half.
Okay,
so
they're in America.
Because they are in America.
Because I was hearing that, I was like, wait a minute. Like, are you talking about Nazi Germany? Well, then 1950, so that is a Nazi Germany. Where is it? Whereas if you was born with some sort of physical handicap, she said a hand difference, so she has a deformity on her hands, as you can see in the video. Where was this mandatory abortion?
Yeah, no, I mean, not even mandatory. I don't think there would have been many voluntary, and it definitely would have been illegal in the 50s. Because, Roe v. Wade was passed in, 79?
Yeah. What's up, Mike, by the way?
Hey, Michael.
So I was just puzzled. I was like, where did she think that? I don't know where she's getting that from.
This is a really strange thing to say, and then it doesn't. I don't see what it has to do with her argument, to be honest.
Right. And you know what's even stranger is that in the 1950s, a much larger percentage of the country was Christian than it is now.
Yeah. And then, by the way, given the topic here for that brief section of things is abortion, it's statistically dependent upon the mother. So when
Right.
you say you were at more risk in the 90s, or you were still at a high risk in the 90s, I only assume that because your mother is pro-choice. If your mother's not pro-choice, then you were at no risk at all.
Right.
I mean,
And,
like,
and this is I don't know, man. So she talking about 1950s America in a time where it was definitely more Christian than it is now. This is
and illegal to have
before.
abortions.
Say it again.
And illegal to have abortions.
Right. So I mean, I don't understand why does she think this. So and when I first heard her say this, the first thing my mind went to is that passage in the Bible that talks about people with deformities. So, and I got to pull it up. So let's read it. Let's see what God thinks about people with hand differences. The Lord said to Moses, say to Aaron, for the generations to come, none of your descendants who has a defect may come near to offer food of his God. No man who has an defect may come near. No man who is blind or lame, disfigured or deformed. No man with a crippled foot or hand, or who is a hunchback or a dwarf, or who has any eye defect, or has a festering or running sores or damaged testicles. No descendant of Aaron the priest who has any defect is to come near to present the food offerings to the Lord. He has a defect. He must not come near to offer the food of his God. He may eat the most holy food of his God as well as the holy food. Yet, because of his defect, he must not go near the curtain or approach the altar and so desecrate my sanctuary. So there you go. So that's what God thinks about her. Her coming to the altar to give a sacrifice to the God that she loves and serves, it would be a desecration. Why? Because of her hand.
I mean, like, look, the Bible there, you mentioned the curtain. That's talking, if for any non-Christians that are watching, or even if you're a Christian, you may not be aware that this is talking about the room of the Holy of Holies within the temple. And it says you're not even to approach it. You're not supposed to get near it if you have a physical defect or, you have sores or open, or just because, like, it would desecrate the temple itself. It says don't approach the curtain. That's talking about the Holy of Holies, the room that only the high priest would enter to sacrifice. But the meals that they're prepping and all this stuff was laid down on the altar just outside the room. And it says, don't approach that room. I mean, that's the biblical stance on, like, a hand defect or hand deficiency
Right.
in the Bible. So when you talk about societal norms, and then you mention abortion, which has nothing to do with societal norm, and you talk about the 1950s, which is just straight not legal or, like, potentially relevant because there are more Christians than there are today, then if you're all you're basing this on is the Bible, then we don't have a good strong reason to value the Bible's particular thought on your hand deficiency. Like,
By the way, so 1950. So I just looked it up. So it's Angle versus Vitale. So that Supreme Court case, which ruled out school prayers, or it didn't. You could pray in school, but it just said like the school can't sponsor it.
right.
So a lot of people look at this case as God getting kicked out of school. So this is like 12 years, prior to that, right? So this is super Christian America. And now she's talking about 1950. She's making this claim, which is false, by the way. But if it was true, it would kind of contradict her claim about Christianity providing some sort of safety from societal norms. Because in this Christian society, the normal thing would be to kill her because she has defect on her hands.
Yeah, Michael, the Canadian atheist, pointed out that the Assyrians actually had a law, a prohibition of abortion, yet the Bible doesn't make any references to banning things like abortion to any of the three of our knowledge. As much as we searched and talked on it and had guests on the show that are very, very pro-life. We've had no one come with Bible verses supporting the prohibition of abortion. But yeah, that is a pretty interesting factoid that the Assyrians, which are mentioned in the Bible, that are around the same time as the Hebrews and the Israelites of the Old Testament, had laws on record indicating that they were against abortion. So the Bible doesn't state that, and societal norms actually kind of look down on abortion. I don't know if you've ever talked to anyone who's had one and then asked them about it, but there's a pretty interesting John Oliver piece where they're talking about how it's considered, degrading, and people look at you a particular way, even though they have no idea what the history or the circumstances surrounding your abortion are. A lot of people look at you as it's just you're doing it because, you just don't want to have another kid or whatever, but there's a lot of reasons, financially, mentally, like fiscally, in your own home. I mean, you may be in a home full of abuse that you don't want to bring that child into, stuff like that. I mean, there's an infinite number of reasons, on top of just bodily autonomy, which is the best reason we can give for abortion. But yeah, also, AAA, if you saw, Michael mentioned if Josh would be happy to come on the show. Dr. Josh, he's the guy he mentioned that wrote several books on the Bible and abortion, and he showed me some of them.
Wes will do it. I feel like Wes would probably be the best Christian apologist that I think we had on the channel that'd be willing to.
Also, Edward's.
I'll hit him up.
Edward.
What's going on, Ed?
So we're gonna get back to the video, but thanks for the chat. We'll keep it a little more chat focused because we're just doing the response video this week. So.
And so back even in the 90s when I was born, even that was a concern. And so I can't base.
Yeah.
So she said even in the 90s, that was a concern.
Yeah.
I still hear that. I don't know what she's talking about. Like, so it's again, like it's up to the mother.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, unless her mother was pro-choice, like there was not a concern.
Yeah.
By the way, and I'm not trying to disparage like what she's saying or the lifestyle she has to live or anything like that. What I'm pointing out is that A, you cannot be concerned about something before your birth, and B, the only reason you'd be concerned about an abortion is if you're the mother that's about to have it. So you retroactively saying that you were at great danger of being aborted in the 90s and even greater danger of being aborted in the 50s, which is just blatantly false, is kind of strange. Like, even if we know, like, we're well aware that you have a deficiency or that you have an abnormality or, like a hand issue or other reasons, that doesn't give you any credence to believe that you're going to get aborted because you don't have a belief system yet, because chances are you're an embryo. So I'm just confused as to that. And again,
as a matter of fact, so let's get in here. So we're talking about. So let me read this comment and then I'll say my thought. Mentions Old Testament Jewish laws for Judaism, but about deformity. It doesn't mention Jesus, aka God, going to the deformed and healing them. No. So sure, if you want to say that, yeah, Jesus healed somebody, cool. And that's cool. The issue is God has a problem with the deformity. And so she's appealing to God as having some sort of, I guess, divine value, because God sees her as some sort of human being. She's appealing to God as the Christianity as some sort of equality. And what we're pointing out in that verse is that that's not what that God gives.
Also, like, we're not trying to say that, like, Jesus, assuming that you believe Jesus is real and that he was divine, that I wouldn't disparage that the Bible does make these claims that he healed people and, went to Lazarus and even raised the dead, that kind of thing. However, when we're talking about how God views people, that's kind of what we're looking at. And she was talking about the societal norms of people and how they're looked upon versus how God looks at people. And I agree the societal norms have shifted over the years. Obviously, what used to be societally incorrect is now becoming a more, not necessarily tolerant, but a more understood version of what happens with maladies, deformities, etc. in the human body. Whereas there's no correction for that in the Bible.
That's what I was going to say. So like Jesus healing someone says nothing about his position on the way he views the handicap. So what would have been more beneficial as far as principles about how to treat people would be to say something like, yeah, all that stuff I said about handicapped people back in Leviticus, that's wrong. Whoever you are, defect or not, you can come to me. That would be how you rectify it, not by healing the handicap, because it's still saying the handicap are still unclean, regardless of Jesus healing people.
Yeah, and by the way, I mean, we could even talk about things like leprosy, which is no longer a thing in the modern world, if we will. But, I mean, things like leprosy where it's going to ultimately kill the person, where healing that could be an obvious thing that Jesus could do as a sign of goodness towards that person, because he's not only going to cure them of these sores, but he's also going to prolong their life. However, pointing out something like, for instance, in this video, this girl has a hand deficiency, or she called it handicapped, essentially, where her arms didn't form the way that most humans' arms form, right? Instead of just coming up and extending her arm and making it look like everyone else, just teaching everyone the lesson that she's no less valuable than everybody else just because of the way her hands formed. That has nothing to do with how you value a human. And
if you're saying Jesus is God, then it's his fault that they had the deformity in the first place.
That's a different story. But yeah, feel free to respond and kind of take that in. Sorry, we kind of jumped on you there,
or email to come on the show.
Yeah, that's also an option, but I just wanted to just kind of throw it out there and let you think on that for a bit before you respond if you decide to. But welcome to the show. Hope you're enjoying it so far.
My value of life and my value system, or another person's value of life, based off something that's a societal norm that could change in a decade or even change within 5 years. And so for me, Christianity offers that value system that's constant and consistent with the value of life, the value...
Did you froze?
Am I still frozen?
No. You're
okay.
Unfrozen now, but the video's kind of acting up. There you go.
All right, so she was saying how she don't want to base it on societal norms, something that could change at a decade, right? Now, this kind of highlights the argument that Blue Sky was making. It seemed like when he talks about Jesus healing someone, it sounds maybe I misunderstood you here, but it sounded like you were almost trying to say that Jesus's or God's view of the handicap kind of changed, right? And she's talking about she doesn't want to base her morality on society that could change over a decade. Well, God's views can change too, by your argument. I mean, I would argue that his views didn't change, but I mean, if we grant that Jesus' views did change, then again, Christianity is not giving a consistent value that we can attribute to humans.
I also want to point out something here, and that although we mentioned at the beginning, neither of us would say that we form our values based on society, which I think that's a pretty bad idea in general. I think that society can get it wrong a lot. However, I will say that something that's interesting is that you're saying you don't want to, well, she's saying, not anyone particular, but she in this video is saying she doesn't want to base it on something that could change in 5 or 10 years. But to me, that kind of puts yourself as a closed book on a shelf, and I'm going to straight up bash every religion ever. That is exactly what, if you have a holy book, be it the Bible or the Quran or the Tanakh, and you have this closed book and you assume it is the answer, that is the same thing. And I'm not promoting listening to society for their wiseness or their you know how good society is, I would say that it's a bad idea. But I would say that as time has progressed, at least in America, at least where she lives and where both of us live, that society has gotten better at eradicating things that were abhorrent and wrong, and they have done better at getting things into a more accepting and accepted light, such as the eradication of slavery from the 1860s America up until 1865, where it was a societal norm prior to that to have slaves. And prior to, I mean, what was it, early 2000s, mid 2000s, like gay marriage wasn't allowed. And I'm sure the Christians are adamantly still opposed to that. But when you have two people that want to form a commitment to each other, that is a progressed society that has moved forward. When you're saying you don't want to change and you have this closed book and closed mind, what happens when I come along with better evidence, or what happens when I come along with things that have legitimately changed that we can now show you to be better than what you were doing? And what I mean by that is, like, hey, you don't treat people as slaves because that's wrong. Now we have a new viewpoint on how humans are equal. And if you're a closed book and you say, I don't want to be influenced by anything that can change, and you have all the answers in your holy book, then you're stuck with things that are in that holy book. Even if,
it limits progression.
Yeah, even if that means that you're stuck in the past.
Right. That's what, like, the ability to change means you are now allowed to adjust based off of new information.
Yep.
And now you're kind of just, ruling out that possibility because you say, oh, this thing is consistent. This thing never changes. And so I don't want to go into a rant about the Old Testament God's treatment of people. But if you look through that, it generally is not very good. I mean, this story after story of this, like God getting angry at a few people and then wiping out the entire earth with a flood. You got stuff like that, or wiping out an entire nation, including the children. Or then how about even some of the
at a time?
Go ahead.
I said like entire cities at a time, like Sodom and Gomorrah. There's entire nations like the Amalekites. There's,
right.
Just Jericho. Like we just know that God has wiped out people.
If there was any story in the Bible that shows the way God views humans, I think the book of Job is a really great example of that. So Job, his most faithful servant, God allows Satan to make his life hell, a living hell, kill all his children, take all his wealth, even ruin his health, to win a bet. And after his children are dead, this is the part that gets me. God fixes it by giving him more children.
Sevenfold.
Right. As if children are just some sort of commodity. Yeah, I killed your kids, but guess what? Here's some new ones. If that is not demeaning,
wives, his wives, his servants, literally everything that Job had was taken from him. It like over and over, you see the story progress where Satan's like, well, if you just let me do this, and God's like, all right, go for it. If you just let me do this, all right, go for it. And he's like, you can't touch his life. Like over and over, you'll see it says you can't touch his life, right? So, and then even at the end, God gives into that and says, sure, you can even touch his life. You can make him sick, but you can't kill him. Right? Like God just keeps giving in to Satan to win this bet. And then he says, oh, I'll replace your wives and your servants and your houses and your children sevenfold.
Right. So to me, the thought that you could replace a kid with another kid, that just shows that's the reducing of human to a commodity. I have a daughter, And if something was to happen to her, like I'd be sick. And the thing that I could just replace her by having another child, that if you want to talk about the way the Old Testament God views humans, just think about that. That you could just be replaced with another person as if you're just a number.
Some dude walks into your house and murders your wife and kid, and then he goes and robs a hospital of all the newborns and brings them to your house and drops them off.
Right.
Like, there you go. You're square.
Right. See, that's what Mike says. Yeah, it makes life cheap. Yeah. Like if I break your Xbox, I can just buy you a new one. It doesn't work that way with children. I'm sorry. And if you think like that, then you're a monster.
Yeah.
And if your God thinks like that, then he is one too.
Yep.
But
all right, back to the video.
Value of diversity and the value of free will and choice. And so for
I'm going to pause here real quick because as a person who grew up believing in free will and choice, and then moving to Arminianism, from Arminianism to Calvinism, then I'll say that the Bible doesn't give much support for free will, especially when it comes to things like your salvation. And since I paused, Blue Sky commented, "Why does life and death matter so much to you? It's because you think that it's all you get. God probably gave all of Job's kids one-way tickets to heaven. Who's trying to stay on this cursed planet?"
What we should start doing is just killing, like forget giving birth. So as soon as someone gets pregnant, let's just kill the kid. That way they get to go to heaven and be with Jesus. Maybe this woman who's talking in the video, maybe she should have been killed. Society would have been doing a favor because she get to go straight to heaven, right?
I mean, so I'm not condoning this because it's not wise, and just this is a thought experiment. I'm prefacing what I'm about to say. This is a thought experiment, but Blue Sky, given the argument that you're presenting and the way that you're making it sounds like you're a Christian. And if
that's contradicting himself, he said they aren't guaranteed heaven. So why suggest Job's kids went there?
Yeah, well, my thing was going to be like, and this is just a thought experiment. I'm not recommending it. I really don't want you to do this. But if you're a self-proclaimed Christian, why haven't you committed suicide? Because it seems to me like you just hate this cursed planet, right? Like it's the worst thing in the world. It's quite literally the closest thing to hell you're ever going to get. Why continue to live? To me, it seems like if there's a heavenly road ahead of you with streets of gold that is just full of praising God for all of eternity, that's something you should desire so much to get to that you do whatever it took to get there. And I mean, like, I'm not, trying to be weird, but like James Joyce Ulysses, if you read the story of like the sirens that had such a beautiful voice that captains and people would jump off their ship just to go hear them sing, and they would end up drowning or getting eaten by the sirens, right? That's just a weird thing about how good someone's voice is. If you are promised the absence of hell and an almighty eternal God and eternal joy without pain or suffering on streets of gold, imagine what someone would do just for that, right? I mean, like, that's God has us here for a reason, but if he takes me tomorrow, then so be it. Well, I mean, like, this is kind of what my point being, like, you just said, like, well, we could just take Job's kids. Why is life so important to you? Why
so
like,
the answer to the first question, like, so life is important to me. Like I value sentience, especially humans, because I'm a human. But that's why it's important to me. I value it. As far as I can tell, this is the only life that I can get. But yeah, I value life apparently far more than your God, who thinks it can just be replaced. In Mike's words, yes, life is just kind of cheap, right? So,
yeah, I mean, like the trick of living a life without assuming that there's anything thereafter is that you tend to live it like it's the only one you've got, because as far as I can tell, it is. And that's a good thing, because if you live your life like you're going to live an eternity in heaven thereafter, You may not care about your loved ones as much because you think you're going to see them forever hereafter. And maybe that's something you should genuinely consider from the comments that you're making. That
Right.
if I'm not saying you're wrong, because I cannot disprove Christianity beyond a shadow of a doubt for you. You're more than welcome to come on the show. We can have a discussion about the flaws that I find in it. However,
Email us, bro.
that's not something I can necessarily convince you of. However, what I can say, with full certainty, is that it is undoubtedly better to live a life knowing that you've done all you can to love and to have a good life here on earth while you have it. Because if there is no eternity, then, and you live your life like you're going to see your people, like your friends and family forever hereafter, it's not you that's going to suffer. It's all those people that you didn't spend time with because you thought you would sometime in the future. Like, I know personally people that have lost loved ones that, you know, were Christians. I know people that have this hope for it in the future. But I can tell you this without any doubt. There's people that I love that I've lost that I wish I could go back and give more time to. Right now. And even if there were a heaven, and even if I could do it in the future, that's still something I would love the memory of, you know? That's something that it doesn't make any sense to me to say, like, oh, well, I'm going to see them forever in the future, so it doesn't matter now. No, I would give up a significant amount of my time and wealth to spend some more time with my grandmother. That's just something I would do if given the opportunity, you know? But, as far as I know, that can't happen. Atheist, Canadian atheist, Michael, going mobile. Thanks, Michael. I appreciate you always listening, man. I appreciate your support. Sorry we went on a little tangent there. Continuing.
For me personally, that's why I've chosen to be a Christian, in addition to all the other great things that God offers with having a relationship.
It's almost over. Okay, yeah, it's over now. So Blue Sky, out of curiosity, so I don't know if you got to watch the whole video, or if you got to watch just the cut-ups of us responding to it. What are your thoughts on someone who is using Christianity for the purpose of a societal stability, or a stability of you know, morality, if you will, versus someone who's, you know, worshiping Jesus? Because as AAA and I pointed out earlier, right at the beginning, if I were my old Christian self, I might look at this person as almost heretical. Because when I thought of myself as a Christian, I thought of myself as someone that was chosen by God through his grace. I was going to go to heaven. And this person saying, I have a great way of giving me stability in a viewpoint or worldview or a stance. Also, all the other benefits that come with Christianity. Literally the last word she said as an afterthought. Also, all the other benefits. Like, she's a Christian because of the societal, like, she's not for societal norms. Also, all the other benefits. If you summed up her sentence and you cut out all the extra words, she said, I'm a Christian because it provides something that is not the societal norms to morality. Also, all the other benefits.
Like what?
That's what she said. I mean, you see what I'm saying, though? Like, as a former Christian, as someone that, like, if I put my Christian hat back on, and I was like, why am I a Christian? The answer isn't because it gives me something outside of societal norms. It says, I agreed with you about not mentioning Jesus in the response. Based off her answer, I think it shows she really cares about fighting abortion because she thought or knew she herself was at risk of it.
So the Bible doesn't actually prevent abortion. So before I go into this passage, there's a passage in the Bible that talks about an unfaithful wife, and if she's with child, well, if basically it works like this: the husband suspects her of cheating. He takes her to the temple. The priest makes some sort of concoction, and she drinks it, and it makes her barren. It destroys her reproductive system. It says her thyroid's out. And so if she's pregnant, obviously that results in abortion. This comes from a law straight from God. So even living under Judaic law, she would still be at risk to abortion. Also, let's say, and she was living in this time and wasn't living under Judaic law, she could possibly be born into a country that was under God's wrath, right? So what is the people group Moses, like he said, kill all the
Amalekites?
I think it's the Amalekites when who's wiping them out, Canaanites when you're wiping those out. So if she's under the assumption that the Christian God provides some sort of protection in the womb, well, she couldn't be any more wrong. It definitely doesn't. The Christian God was killing indiscriminately.
Let me interrupt real quick to answer Phantom's question before you continue. Yeah. Phantom, it says, does it matter that the Bible doesn't prohibit abortion if modern Christians believe that God thinks abortion is wrong? The answer to that is yes and no. The reason I say yes and no is because, yes, it matters, because if you are a self-proclaimed Christian, what you should be doing is standing on the principles that God has provided. And since he hasn't given you any instruction other than in the Old Testament verse that we're about to share on abortion, the only laws that you have to go off of are the ones that he mentioned, I believe, in either Exodus or Leviticus. I forget where it's going to be. With that in mind, there are Christians that if you had them pushed on this show or in the presence of a debate format where you ask them, they would cede to you that they have no reason to believe abortion's wrong other than they think that, all life is precious and belongs to God. And that God is the ultimate giver of life, and he should be the only one that can take it. However, I'll say that the yes there is that it matters because what are you basing this off of if it's not the Bible? Because that's your source of morality and instruction for Christianity. Yes. And then no, it doesn't matter because ultimately there is still dispute, but not really amongst a lot of Christians. However, I will say that some Christians might go as far to say that if it's not biblical, then they don't agree with it.
Yeah, and I'll say this too, why it still matters to Christians, the way they act. So as you know, you're probably aware, Christianity has adopted a lot of dogma that isn't based on the Bible. Like, for instance, like the idea that inerrancy, that there are no errors in the Bible. Tell me, where in the Bible does this claim to be inerrant? That's just not a thing. Yeah. Like, I could see the infallibility when it says all scripture is God breathed, but it doesn't tell you what is and isn't scripture. So that's problematic. We just know what scripture is. Whatever it is, it's inspired. So does that include the book of John? I don't know, because it doesn't tell you what it is.
Book of Enoch? Maybe.
Right. Yeah, no idea. So that's useless. Inerrancy just isn't in there at all. We talk about ideas like the God existing outside of space and time. Where is that in the Bible? So that we see Christianity has adopted a lot of dogma that they didn't get from the Bible. So that's why I would say it's still important to them, despite it not having any sort of biblical basis.
I'd also like to take that a step further and say that they've done things like adopt societal norms, like the eradication and abolishment of slavery. So even though the Bible doesn't specifically prohibit slavery anywhere, definitely doesn't, societally and legally, the United States abolished slavery. And one might say, well, yeah, Christians were the predominant side of fighting for the slaves. Well, Christians made up 90% of the country, so they were the predominant force on both sides, fighting for the slaves and fighting against them. The people that were pro-slavery were using the Bible to support their stance on slavery, and the people that were anti-slavery were using the Bible to support their stance on anti-slavery. So with that in mind, yeah, that it can matter, and it can impact things like societal norms, because Christians are taking something that, like, you ask a modern Christian today in 2020's America, is slavery wrong? Without hesitation, I'd say 99.99% of them are going to say, yeah, slavery's wrong. But
How about
when
women
we
equality,
push people
female
on the
equality?
but when we've pushed people on this show about slavery, you'll see the gymnastics and the backflips that these people have to do, because the Bible doesn't support that. The Bible allows for slavery, it gives rules on slavery, and then it does not in the future prohibit slavery. And you watch the mental gymnastics and backflips begin as we talk about how something that the society said was wrong, and then society put forth to make law to make it wrong. Blue Sky says, Old and New Testament is different. Old Testament was eye for an eye. Jesus said turn the other cheek. You can't go Christianity with Judaism's law. You can't be a Christian without reading Old. I assume it's going to be Testament. It's not there for me yet. However,
So what about that stuff about God providing this consistent moral system? So it's not eye for an eye anymore. Now it changes. This kind of undercuts the argument that the woman was making in the video, in my opinion. It just shows that God isn't a consistent foundation. Why? Because God changes. Because he inspired the Old and the New Testament, right? So why are they saying different things? Well, why is it that, under your view, the New Testament is a correction of the Old? Why does it need correcting? Isn't that an implication that the Old Testament was wrong? There's so many problems with this.
Ephesians chapter 6, verse 5. Slaves, obey your earthly masters with fear and trembling. Nowhere in the Old Testament or New Testament does it condemn slavery.
Also, it wasn't always an eye for an eye. Not for slavery. It's not for slaves. Like, if you destroy your slave's eye, it's not eye for eye. You just let them go.
Yeah, if you beat
so
them,
it doesn't
as long
even
as they
treat
don't
it
die
doesn't
within
even
a
treat
day or
slaves the
two.
same. Say it again.
Yeah, if you beat them, as long as they don't die within a day or two, there will be no punishment.
Because they are your property.
Yeah. So that's Old Testament for you. And in the New Testament, I mean, the only verses that we have that really refer to slavery typically are referred to by Paul. We have Ephesians, we have Philemon, and it says over and over again, submit to your masters. And it says you can be a Christian without reading the Old Testament. I tend to agree with that. I'd say that Christianity is something that, as far as I can understand it, is something that God has given to the people that he chose, which is why I made a specific reference to free will. And she mentioned free will in this, but I think it's people that God has chosen, and I don't think you necessarily have to read any of the Bible to be a chosen person of God. Especially given if you believe that the founders of the faith, like David, who obviously didn't have a Bible because he wrote some of the Bible as far as we can tell, if you think that he's in heaven, obviously he never read the Bible, right? Because he wrote part of Psalm and maybe, some of the other Old Testament chapters and verses. Or people like, the disciples, who some of them we know were illiterate. They couldn't have read the Old Testament because A, it hadn't been translated yet, they didn't speak the same language, and they didn't know how to read. So I'm completely fine with that. I'm just saying that if you can read the Bible, and you accept it as one text with instructions for humans, then you can't ignore the Old Testament and the things that it says. And since your God is supposedly unchanging, the God that commanded the things of the Old Testament is the same God that commands things in the New Testament. Phantom said, I guess what I'm saying is that if you argue with Christians don't believe, it can kind of be like when they argue atheists believe nothing exploded and became something. That's not a belief. Our point here being is that some Christians would loudly reject something that is not biblical. People often refer to themselves as sola scriptura, which is the Latin for only scripture. And if you're familiar with the term, nothing outside of the Bible has any bearing on their beliefs, according to them. So the Constitution means nothing because it's not from the Bible. The, abolishment of slavery in the 1800s doesn't mean a thing. Well, what does the Bible say? Because I'll get back to you once I've read that, and then we can talk. That is how sola scriptura Christians work. Which is why I wanted to make out that difference and why I said 99.99% of Christians in modernity would agree that slavery is wrong. However, as you can go back and watch our episodes that talk about slavery on this show, mental gymnastics start when you start to push them on how slavery in the Bible works.
Facts. As a matter of fact, I had met a Christian. And matter of fact, he attended the church that I was going to when I deconverted, and we had a conversation like shortly after me leaving and telling them that I had left Christianity. And I asked him about slavery, and he straight up said that he doesn't think that slavery is intrinsically wrong, or he doesn't believe it's necessarily wrong. He says there are godly ways that it could be done, and also God, because he's God, he has the right to do whatever he wants with it. And so if he wants to say that people can have slaves and it be moral, then that's just the case. And so he's one of those hardcore sola scriptura guys.
Yeah, Blue Sky says slavery was a necessity. In Genesis, they willingly sold themselves into Egypt to avoid dying of starvation.
Yeah, but I don't think that's what we're referring to mostly. Like we're talking about like in Leviticus when it talks about from the heathen nations around you, you may purchase your slaves. Like these aren't people that willingly sold themselves into slavery to avoid, some catastrophe.
Yeah, and by the way, there is a abundant distinction in Scripture and in verbiage alike of the difference between indentured servitude and slavery. Someone who sells themselves in debt for food, for starvation's sake, would be considered an indentured servant. They would agree with the owner of the food and land that they were allowed to work to eat a time in which they would do so, and they could leave if they chose to do so. That is not the case with slavery, and in fact, we know, according to Exodus 21 and Leviticus 25, that slavery in the Old Testament, not only could you buy slaves from the heathen nations around you, you could pass your slaves on to your children, because they were your property. Now, I don't know if you know anything about indentured servitude, but just so you're aware, you can't sell yourself to be an indentured servant beyond your own life expectancy. So, when you're passing slaves onto your children, you have what's called generational slavery and generational adoptive slavery, which means that your future people will inherit slaves and their children. So you get the slaves, you get to pass them to your children. The slaves have children, which are now your slaves, and they become slaves of your children. There is a distinction in the Old Testament.
I think I reject this first clause when he says slavery was a necessity.
I also reject.
I don't think it was a necessity. Like when? He says that in Genesis they willingly sold themselves to Egypt to avoid dying of starvation. So you're saying that's the only way they could have avoided dying of starvation?
I mean, as a matter of fact, if you're a Christian or if you've read the Bible, you would say that
That's not even what happened.
Not only that, but it's definitely
But-
not. Like we have like the Exodus, right? So we have
But-
the Exodus, and then people are wandering in the wilderness for 40 years, and what does God do? He provides manna from heaven. So literally, if you don't want to starve, it's not slavery or indentured servitude. God provided.
Right.
Like there's literally an option 20 chapters later. It happens.
Yes. And then, but on top of that, like, I mean, even here, so when according to the Bible, the way the Israel became slaves in Egypt, it wasn't because they sold themselves to avoid starvation.
No, it's
So-
because Egypt ruled the
Yeah,
land.
so they get there, they live there just with Joseph, and they aren't slaves. And then after so many generations, a pharaoh comes up and he doesn't remember Joseph, and so they enslaves them. That's the way it says in the Bible. So I mean, there's so many. I think, yeah, there's so many problems with this argument.
Yeah, I mean, Blue Sky, you're welcome to come on the show if you'd like. Now that's
Email us,
debatable
bro.
stream at Gmail, and you can have kind of a live conversation instead of the comments. Although we do appreciate the comments and keeping the live chat going. It might be easier just to have a discussion where it's in real time, and you can obviously express something more than however many characters the comment section will let you at a time. And we could talk about it. I would say you definitely want to bring your A game. And I'd highly recommend reviewing Exodus chapter 20, 21, Leviticus 25 in depth because it's something that we've talked about extensively on the show. Also, if you're interested, there was a guy in the chat before you now. His name was Michael, the Canadian atheist. He was talking about Dr. Josh being willing to come on the show to talk with slavery about someone. If you'd like to come on and talk with a PhD in history who's written several books on biblical slavery, we could set that up for you. Like that could be a golden opportunity for you to learn from someone who has a PhD in history on like ancient slavery. Like he mentioned a fun fact in the comments earlier about abortion and how people had laws on the book about abortion in the times of the Old Testament. And so that guy has written several books. He's a historian and a PhD on laws and practices of biblical accounts and people that are found in the Bible and the practices and laws that they had. So if that's something you're interested in, let us know, because we can talk to Canadian Atheist, get Dr. Josh on. You can talk to a PhD about it, and you can express your concern. We'll sit back and shut up. We'll let you have the whole show. Because it's something that we've hashed out over and over again, and it seems that we kind of get the same tired arguments. But, I mean, I'd love to have a PhD in history come in and really solidify some of these laws that other nations surrounding Israel had, and talk about how there are laws that are, adopted by the biblical Hebrews that just basically allow for slavery. So, just something to consider. Or if you want to come and talk to us, we're welcome to that as well. It's Now That's Debatable Stream at Gmail, or mine is Fantastic Facade, my little handle tag at Gmail. It's a generic, easy enough to remember email. But yeah, the long and the short of this video is that I think it's a rehearsed but poor answer to the question. And I think that if you are trying to convince someone of Christianity and they're looking for a sense of morals, that this might be the path you might take. And I'm not saying that this person is playing on their disability or that they're using it to an advantage or disadvantage for the sake of argument or anything like that. I hope that this video was respectful and understanding of like, we're not trying to disparage the person with a disability. As a matter of fact, I would say that as a secular humanist, and I speak on behalf of AAA here, and if I'm wrong, he can interject, but I would say that we value that person's life the same as any other person's life, and it doesn't matter what's going on with her hands, or if it's a deformity, or just a non-growth, or whatever happened to cause that. I don't know. I don't know the person, but I don't look at her, and I'm sure AAA doesn't either, as any less valuable of a person. Whereas we pointed out in the Old Testament, God might, and he does. And so, if this is your argument for Christianity, I think it's a bad one. And if you're sitting there thinking it's a good one, maybe come on the show and we can talk about it. Even though it's called debatable, now that's debatable, it's open forum. You know, we just have conversations and we just talk. But yeah, with that in mind, I emailed Stuart, and if Stuart reaches out to us, we're going to do our best to either get Stuart or Cliff on the show, to have them on for a discussion. But next week we have Fanatic, the former Christian rapper, and I know we're going to try to get Canadian Atheist on, Michael and Dean, if he's willing to come back on again. I know Wes wants to come back on and have another discussion with them. I think that would be a fun, good conversation that we can kind of sit back and enjoy instead of having to do all the work. Was there anything you wanted to add, AAA?
Oh, still waiting to hear back on what's his name? Scott, who challenged you to the resurrection debate.
Yeah. So
still waiting.
I've momentarily, not momentarily, I've moderately worked on a script that I will read out for that. Scott, if you watch this, or if someone tags you in it and you decide to watch it, or if you listen to it, or you just hear about it and you think about us, formal debate with Scott on is Jesus God. And I've started writing my script, and I'll have it timed out and polished. Both my opening and my rebuttal will be written beforehand. And I will read it verbatim. I won't make any changes to it based on the response or the rebuttal that Scott has. I also gave the option to Scott to go first or second. It doesn't matter to me in the debate lineup. So if that happens, we're going to have a formal debate with timers up on the screen, and I'll be sadly boringly reading a script, but I think it can be done just to prove a point. So anything else? Do we have any other guests that we know are coming on soon?
No, I'm still hunting down some more guests. We got kind of a dry spell after Fanatic. Hopefully I'll land some and get some more people back on. If there's a guest that you really like, you want to hear him come back on, then hit us up. Let us know. Yeah, as long as it's not, what's his name, Reformed Judeo-Christian Ethic, that guy.
Yeah, that guy. He's
the only guy that's just banned from the show.
It's true. So.
Yeah, that's all I got, man.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And if you did or have any questions, would like to come on, now that's debatableStream@gmail.com, or just email me. I'm Fantastic Facade. You can email that directly at Gmail, or give us a comment on YouTube. Let us know you want to come on. We'll be glad to host you and have a discussion about anything debatable you'd like to talk about. It doesn't have to be religion or abortion or slavery. It could be anything you want. But we'll see you guys next week, where we're going to have Fanatic on. Look forward to that discussion. Hope you guys have a great afternoon.